And I think we're going to be live, ladies and gentlemen. Check, check. Check, check. Just wait for it to pop up on YouTube and get confirmation. Of course, I monetize, so this will give me an ad right here. But all right. What's going on, everybody? Justin Thomas here from TopShelf Fandom with the Power of the Score live stream. I'm joined by John DelVento, a composer, and our special guest. Say hi to everybody, John, and I'm going to do a quick audio check.
Hey, everybody. How are you? This is John DelVento. Very happy to be here to talk about music, specifically film music, the power of the score. Very nicely worded title, of course, by Justin. Thank you for having me, brother. It's really been a pleasure. Hope everyone's having a great Sunday evening, wherever you're at. Shall we do an audio check of the piano?
Yeah, go ahead and hit those keys, man.
I'll hit those keys. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just going to be blabbing tonight. I do have my piano on and different sounds loaded as we're going to do a little hands-on analysis, literally. So we're just testing piano here.
Hold on, let me do this a check.
Hear those little chords?
I think we are good. All right. So the reason that we obviously want to do this live stream is, number one, John's a great guy, but number two, he actually not only is interested in the field, you work in the field. Could you kind of give everybody the blueprint for what exactly you've done so far in your pretty impressive career, man? Like I can watch Chopped and see your work at Play. All puns intended, and so forth. So kind of let everybody know, what you've done in the industry and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, man, I'm just a composer. I'm a music composer, and I just kind of fell into the world of TV music and TV jingles, things like that. And just, as the years went on, I never gave up and just kind of worked my way up throughout, the little TV shows. I work mainly in, reality shows and sci-fi shows and History Channel shows, things like that. But I do work full-time composing music in kind of that little niche business, and I do commercials and stuff. So it's been fun, but music's been just part of my life basically since I was a kid till now. So it's been a nice long journey. It's been a blessing, but I found my home here in film and TV because it's such a living, breathing form of music. So I got really drawn to it. And yeah, I'm still doing it, and it's going well. And yeah, you mentioned Chopped, but there's about, I think, like 50 TV shows right now using my music, which is a blessing. So a lot of the times when you're watching it, just thank you, everybody, because every time you watch it, I might get like a seventh of a penny. So it helps out a little
all
bit.
All adds up, man.
A lot of crappy reality shows and stuff, but I've gotten a couple indie films and things like that, which is great. I don't live in Hollywood or anything like that and working on the big movies, but
you don't live in Hollywood?
No, and thank God I don't. I like wearing my hoodie, my sweatshirt here. It's a little cold. I just compose in my little cave here, and that's it.
Awesome, man. No, I think it's really interesting. And, for anybody that watches my channel, my main focus is usually the story structure. I look into how they achieve emotional transitions with their screenplays and from the writing process and so forth. So, looking at the score, it's just, again, another reminder of just how complex the process of making a film, a television show, or a reality TV show, which we have some examples of, and I will make the argument for being in most need of a score because it's just so ridiculous without it. Even more ridiculous than most of them already are. Chop being an exception, of course. That's, or anything John's worked on. But yeah, of how the story is conveyed through the language of, music. And you're going to get into music theory and stuff like that. We wanted to drive home a few points by showing some visuals because we are really moved by the music that's present in a scene. And I think what's so powerful about it, because I think it's no surprise when you say music is important and the score is important. Everybody's like, yeah, of course. But I think it's because subconsciously it affects us. Even myself, somebody that I've dabbled in enough areas of production and writing and all the different mediums in this, art form that I arguably could have just gotten good enough not to have a successful career in film, but good enough to see how the sausage is made and have it spoiled for me. But I'm still very moved by like commercials that are obviously shoving sentiment down my throat and stuff. It's because, you know, the music is more of a subconscious thing to how it moves you. And I think it's like this secret weapon that of course we know is important, but until you really like take a look at it, you don't know how integral it really is. So do you want to set us up for this interstellar shot? And did you see that the screen that you're watching from YouTube, John? You folks at home don't know this, but we have to have him watch from from the video feed on YouTube, not the one that we're privately on.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have the feed whipped up, and what we're going to look at here is a scene from Interstellar. I've prepared just a few clips of where I think film music is very effective, and what we're doing here, because Justin talked about how it's subconscious, that you might not always, or 90% of the time, you probably don't even recognize the music in a film, especially in modern movies. But in Interstellar, it's a moment where there's a lot of music. So I have a clip here of Interstellar, which we used, where we took the music out. I took the music out. We had the original soundtrack, and I composed just some various different moods against this. So it's like a couple minute video, and we'll play it, and we'll kind of just talk about the different moods, and you'll be surprised, or maybe even amazed at, you know, now that we're focusing on music, what a difference music can make in almost an extreme way, where you can make a scene that looks like something that's incredibly chaotic, something that's very dangerous, like a joke, like a comedic scene with music. So music is very powerful. And in this little, you know, compilation I put together is Interstellar, a moment where they're in the spaceship, and it's, you know, like a life or death. And there's just several different little bits of music that we put together. So yeah, we'll look at that and we'll talk through it, and you just kind of, hopefully we'll come to a greater appreciation at how music can subconsciously affect the mood of the scene. So I hope you enjoy this, because as Justin said, it has been a good amount of work putting this stream together. So
absolutely. And thank you to Denise Santini out there. I know who you are, and I will be calling you with a big thanks. And of course, if you have any messages or questions, make sure to let him know. I know you watch Chopped, so here's your man right here. I know you watch it a lot. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and play these, and you'll be on a slight delay, but it should work just fine. And if you guys have any questions throughout this, the third segment will be specifically for questions, but you of course can interact at any time. That's why we're doing this as a live stream, not a pre-recorded project. So yeah, you got questions, fire away and we'll jump on them. So here we go with Interstellar, and I'll give you a minute to get to the showroom.
Yeah, and even with the delay, I'll just wait until each section stops, and I'll just comment after this. So we'll listen to each musical example. I'll stop. So even if there's a couple second delay, we'll hit it. And people at home, you know, sit back and enjoy this. This will be fun.
Absolutely. So this, of course, is without the score first, right?
Yeah.
So we're watching the scene without any score whatsoever. We're watching it as it's filmed. This is what their daily would look like. Well, not necessarily their daily with all the special effects in this.
And this just gives your brain a clean slate here to just even compose your own music, or just see what's going on without the music twisting your mind, how it does.
I'll give you a moment to catch up on that one, but that was your first example there, John.
Yep. Example one was basically like a kind of a pop rock track. It was kind of epic with vocals.
Yeah, a journey. I really had a journey sense with that one right there. Mm-hmm. So, and then we're going into the second one right now. I think it's on about a 3 to 5 second delay. Sorry about that.
Yep. And hopefully everybody at home can hear the music nice and clearly. Let us know if you don't.
This is a little bit of folly on their part. This seems like they're messing about now. And now we're going to your third example.
And that was obviously a funny example, a humorous example where you could put kind of a goofy classical song against it and totally kind of ruin the moment. goes a more epic, kind of intense, traditional kind of battle music, which would usually work in just maybe a normal space movie. Obviously, Interstellar did a little bit, and not every composer would put that type of music. And that's just a little more creepier.
I got a John Williams vibe out that last one. You were talking about the creepier one for the just for you guys at home because it's on like a 5-second delay. John, I believe for the fourth example, not the fifth. The fifth is your more Williams-esque score, right?
Yeah, and here's just finally the original music and
what they went with.
Even without our commentary, I think the people at home just can hear for themselves, which is pretty. Some of these examples are extreme for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You went to the very far, but we're trying to just push the point first. First, and then we'll go then, and you'll see the subtle. We'll talk about the leitmotifs and all that, and mixing of people's story threads as well as their individual scores and how intense and how awesome this really gets.
Yeah, and here's their original music, the original music that they composed. That's awesome, really.
Yeah, what I really like about it is I am a true believer that you could change a visual and not have as much of an impactful emotional transition or change in emotion that it's invoking than if you change the music. The music is just that it really just gives it such that that nuanced undertone and kind of tells you without telling you, overtly how to feel. And it can really work well, especially when we go into some of these other examples where we have all of these composers that now, they have different scores and motifs. As I think we'll just ask the question right now. Can you explain to everybody at home what a leitmotif is?
Yeah, sure. We're going to get into, definitely the how and the why and the nitty gritty of, how this craft works. And the basic premise of film music is the idea of a motif, and a motif is a theme, a basic simple musical idea that will represent a character or a musical statement that represents a character. And throughout the movie there can be several motifs, whether it's something like for Darth Vader, something like that. And that's something that a composer will use throughout a movie to, represent a character. So film music is based on motifs, and that's, based in the classical music tradition. But in film music, it's just really, really big, especially in the traditional sense.
Yeah, and Thrones, a lot of people will be familiar with this. There's a lot of great video essays on it about how Djawadi Ramin Djawadi. Am I saying that right there, John?
Ramin Djawadi.
How he really has a clashing of the threads when the story threads intertwine. Say when Arya's over there in Bravos, you have her motif as well as a little bit of Serial Pharrell's and a little bit of Jockin's, and they mix in. You start to see the mashup of them, and as the story naturally comes to thread together, the motifs also thread together, and this happens in Lord of the Rings as well, and a lot of what they call now scoring the world. I see a lot of composers speaking using the terminology or vernacular, not scoring the film, scoring the world. But Lord of the Rings, you have an actual score for the ring itself, right? So it's not just characters and storylines, it's actual narrative tools and devices within the story have their own theme as well.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, because and especially in fantasy world, and you've mentioned two of the major fantasy worlds just now, Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, especially in fantasy, you always really need strong musical motifs to tell a story. And even in Lord of the Rings, you might get something simple like strings changing between kind of two simple long swells, something like this.
Love it.
Something like that you can do over and over for like 6 minutes, and you create like a fantasy vibe. Or you can play, something with big trumpets or something like that for, during war moments or fight moments. And, those are extreme examples, but in fantasy, you need things like that. So that's where the music can really, really help tell a story. And even if it's a subconscious way, like you mentioned with Aria and Serial Pharrell, like a lot of listeners wouldn't maybe have noticed that, but it helps kind of connect the world. When you score a world, that one location might sound like another location might sound like another. It helps the human listener kind of make those connections when they're just staring at a screen. The music helps make that world alive. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
And even if it's just simple, like what I just played, those are like basic level 1 piano notes that any person can play on the white keys, but it just has a certain emotional impact that really works well with film. And that's why film music is kind of its own thing. It might not always be the most complex music, but it's the most probably emotional music. It has the most emotional impact, even if it's just something simple. What I just played probably gave you a really epic feel. It was just really simple notes on just the white keys. So that's the magic of it. The composer has to unlock that.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about when people say that they've studied music theory, which you'll hear a lot with composers or people interested in composing or music in general. What does that exactly mean? And do you have to be able to play an instrument or all of the instruments that are injected into the score in order to compose or score?
Well, yeah, music theory, I mean, it's kind of like asking like an author, like, is it beneficial for a fantasy author to study like Shakespeare, something like that? Like it's, should every author study Shakespeare? Probably, it's probably good to know how everything works, just study the great ones for a couple years, but is it necessary? No. Does it help? Yeah. So I think that's kind of how music theory is. Music theory is the kind of collegiate, the academic study of how music works, the science of it. Why does this sound happy? And why does this sound sad? What notes work well with each other? Why does this work well with that? Why does this not work? Why does that sound like a bunch of garbage? Music theory is about the why, but it is very helpful, music theory, I think, and it's something I studied a lot. And each composer will have their own opinion. I think it's beneficial to have some kind of training.
It's like the building blocks, right? You're getting the structure of how things have gone so far, and then the methodology always differs from the theory in one way or another. But it would give you the base blocks that you need to go, the skill sets and the rules.
Yeah, but the Shakespeare example is probably good because Shakespeare and modern fantasy have very little connections, maybe a minuscule connection. That's very similar. Like music theory is studying the classical art of like Mozart, Bach, like very simple, well-structured music. Modern film music is something that is maybe a little more cool, a little more different, a little more out there. So it's not always tied to traditional music theory, but it's like, Shakespeare and modern fantasy sort of connected, not so much. So that's how I treat music theory. And I think now even more composers don't need music theory as much to be a great composer, to be honest, but it does help. And some of these ideas of how to create emotion, like why do these notes make people feel happy? Why do these notes, make people feel like, there's, somebody's going to die? Sometimes you really have to study that with a teacher to tell you how that stuff works. So there's pros and cons of each for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said about the chords being basic, as from the guitar behind me and the music on my arm. I I'm mirrored right now. I do have a general sense of your basic chords, and I can play enough guitar to get laid at a college. So I'm that guy. But anyways, it's very interesting that you say that they are because emotion when you write in you're scripting out your screenplay, you want what they refer to as primal emotion. Primitive, something that hits home. Everybody loves their kids. Everybody, for the most part, everybody wants to, feel safe, or keep their family safe. Everybody knows what it feels like to be angry. So your emotions always need to be primal. And if you can hit those primal emotions with all your complex storytelling, but when it comes down to it, it's really about somebody trying to protect their family, trying to feed their family, trying to, keep themselves alive, a very primal, instinct. So it's at the sense that it's the bare bones that make it work. So, and then it's layered and it's got all of these complex, sub layers, but that's what makes it unique and beautiful, but not necessarily what really makes it strike home that emotion. At least that's the way it is in writing. So I assume it's very similar with music, like you said, because the notes, it's not like, you're putting something together that's musically intricate in the sense of, like putting together a whole bunch of complex notes. It's something that it's just hidden on the bass tones that we're all so used to. And I think, wouldn't you say that works to its benefit, because everybody kind of associates certain tempos in certain tones with certain feelings? We're kind of preconditioned as well, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, humans are animals, and there's scientific reasons why certain sounds work. And even in the history of film music, there used to be books that were published that the table of contents would just have various emotions, and you'd tell you, play this music for a train, scene, old train chase scene where the pretty woman's tied up by the bad guy in black and white. Play this music when there's a ghost. Play this music when there's an alien. I mean, there is a scientific reasoning for that. Then there's also the role of composers that can be innovative and can do, like, maybe for the happy scene, I'm going to actually write sad music, or maybe for the happy scene, I'm going to have no music. Or there's innovative choices that can kind of mess with our emotions. There's traditional choices. And yeah, these are all just creative decisions that you can make. And in any creative field, there's always room for innovation, but there's also always a tradition. And it just basically comes down to those simple emotions of happy and sad. But film music can be complex. If you listen to John Williams, you hear so many different notes and so many different themes that really are really prevalent in the mix of the audio, in terms of dialogue. The music is just really there. And
Yeah.
even in silent films, the music had to be very busy because it had to tell a story. Just in modern times, film music tends to be a little less busy, but it definitely can be busy. And there's plenty of composers that can be busy.
Yeah, I was stretching for a way to properly convey myself there. I was just going for I was going for the idea of it's not like you have to be out there and try to be some maestro. You obviously, it's very complex and very hard to do, but they're going out there and it's about the emotion. It's not about trying to go out of their way to make something more complex, or to be Eric Clapton on the guitar, or do any type of intricate finger style picking that it's just going to be above and beyond more complex than, say, Blink 182. But Blink 182 is going to get a million more albums sold back in the early 2000s and so forth. So I was just diving at that it's obviously, I don't think anybody, or hopefully nobody, thinks that it's just some schmuck can do it and it's just the simplest form of the craft whatsoever.
I mean, and unfortunately, film composers used to have to deal with that unfortunate reputation that even the great film composers of the 30s and 40s, they should be in the music history books now, but a lot of them just aren't, because they used to be looked at, the classical composers that didn't make it. But hey, the guys that are writing classical music are, barely getting by driving a taxi, and then the people that are working on film music got these big mansions. So it's like, these guys in the 30s and 40s used to work on all these Hollywood movies, make all this money and write all this cool music, but they were really denigrated. They were looked down upon, the film music. It wasn't artistic enough. And even in a lot of the modern music schools where I went to music school was very hoity-toity, classical, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, yada, yada, yada. So I branched out myself into film music. I had to do it. And, you know, the tide is turning a little bit, even in local orchestras. And even Ramin Djawadi did a live tour. Orchestras are playing more film music and TV music because it's part of our culture. It's part of, you know, the human experience of the past 100 years. So, but it hasn't always been like that, unfortunately. And a lot of the great composers that have paved the way for us, and a lot of the composers that a lot of us copy off of, have kind of fallen in history and probably won't come back. So unfortunately, it has been looked like that, you know, at times looked down upon. But, you know, it is what it is. We keep going. And at the end of the day, the music serves the film. So the film is number one. The music is just there to supplement what you need. So if that means simplicity, then the composer provides that. If they need complexity, the composer will provide that. Composer is just another employee at the bottom of the food chain. You know what I'm saying?
Stroke your guitar, not your ego.
That's it. And the best composers will just sit there and do 2 or 3 chords on the guitar, sign the check, and see you later. But getting there is not always that easy. It might seem easy, but to get inside that composer's brain, it's not always that easy. John Williams didn't just sit there for Jaws and go.
Yes, he did. I heard he did. No.
You know, he probably went through a few ideas. It's a simple idea, but yeah, it took his conscious thought to choose that idea. And guess what? It works, and it's lived forever.
Yeah, another thing,
things like that.
Another thing that I wanted to touch on was a scene that I'm about to show, Battle of the Bastards. It's one of my favorite scenes from the series of Game of Thrones, as well as the score is very interesting, just because you have several emotional transitions in this scene, meaning, you know, you go from feeling like it's the end of the world to, oh, there's hope again, back to the end of the world, and there's hope again. They managed to actually take a character that was recently resurrected, like 3 episodes ago, and make you worry for his life. Also, they flip and make it so you actually are worried that he's going to get resurrected because he requests not to be brought back. So they actually turn him getting resurrected into a negative. I'll get into that on another stream, but a lot of very detailed and very complex workings at play here. But with the score, what I was trying to get at is they establish something to mean something, even though we do have the happier tones and tempos and sadder and so forth. But if a series like Game of Thrones that has the ongoing motifs that, you know, progress as the story progresses, you have a base for what you assert a certain tone to mean, or a certain melody to mean. So when they play something like the type of music here that is played before characters usually die, subconsciously we feel like John's about to die. So it's playing off of emotions and using the president's set, subverting expectations, you know. So this score right here is really masterfully done, as well as, you know, having so many emotional transitions in an acting scene, in an action scene, not an acting scene, is amazing as well. Let's see.
I love rewatching this stuff and listening to this music. I'm telling you, it's so good.
The rules of 3 are strong at play here as well. Breaking the rules of 3, they shoot 3 arrows. You know, if he makes it by then he's good. But the 4th one gets him. Somebody should just yell, "Don't be stupid, bro." Insult injury.
It's all about tension.
Notice too how the shots are very close, so you can't see the full aspect of what's happening. So you're very much so isolated as the individual soldiers would be, you know. And this, like you said, it's building all this tension. It's just wonderfully done. Let's get to the good part here, where Jon realizes that he might be fucked.
Yeah, the word is tension, and that's something that Ramin is very good at in Game of Thrones musically, is tension.
But it's easier to be hopeful there with that hopeful music that is tense, but you know, it's giving you that epic battle beat, and you're going in there like, all right, they're going to do this, and you don't see the odds stacked against them as much with the shot being closed in. It's just, this is a masterpiece of a battle scene, in my opinion.
Now,
because all of that tension and all of that build up to go kick some ass is coming to its end right now. And reality is setting in. So that's the motif I'm talking about. That's the music that you will hear before many characters die. So you might not know that for a fact, but as an avid viewer of the show, you're just going to have that subconsciously. You're going to actually fear. You ever have that or hear people say or feel that yourself, that you know a character's not going to really die, but you were actually worried anyways? Are rewatching a film or a television series in which you know for a fact they don't die, or they don't, like with the Viper and the Mountain, that scene, like you still have the hope that he's not going to get his head smashed in. It's because of these undertones, right? It's because they're playing with your emotions.
Absolutely. Music will definitely help with the subconscious reaction, but the director will, and the producer and the composer will probably sit there and go through several options. There's several ways. I mean, you can go over the top with the tense music. You can take the music out completely and just have the raw emotion and the sound effects. You can put a little bit of music. There's so many different ways to do it. So the directors would really have to, make a conscious choice about it, for sure. And in this instance, and in a lot of fantasy, battle scenes like that, you'll have the drums and stuff, which has a dual effect of propelling the scene along, but also just has kind of a tribal battle feel in the back, because humans have these kind of, conscious, subconscious reactions to it. So there's so much that goes into these decisions.
Sound design.
It's the composer, but it's also the director too. The director will tell the composer what the composer needs and the amount of tension you need and things like that.
After this scene,
nice.
I want to get your take on it, for you to explain really quick the scoring process and what exactly placeholder scores are and stuff like that in a moment. I just want to play the rest of this one out.
Oh yeah, the scene. Yeah.
You knew he wasn't gonna die, you know what I mean? But still, even watching it. And how many times do you hear people talk like that? There you go. And then you get it again. Again, so you get it again where hope is lost, and then it's rinse and repeat. But very interesting stuff, and it's one of the, as far as sound design goes, as far as composing goes, because isolating of FX, like you said, in a lot of action scenes you have people like everything will go silent, or you hear the ringing around them, or like even their Davos's voice was isolated. It's not, we know that's not what happens in real time, but it's the hyper awareness of these details and the focusing in on them and knowing when to do it and when not to. But now when you get a scene, Jon, or you get a job, can you explain what the actual process is and how it usually goes? Because we'll discuss a little bit later that there are instances where scenes are scored before they're filmed, but that is the exception, not the rule, from what I know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that happens once in a while. It happens on a lot of very out there movies like The Joker. The music was written before. In Inception, the music was written before, but 99.9 even percent of the time, the composer will work with a cut already. The movie will be cut and roughly edited first, and the music's added after. 99% of the time.
So now, what is scoring? When somebody says they're scoring something, what does that exactly mean?
Yeah, for sure. And probably soon I'll end up doing the screen share and I'll show you one of my actual projects because nowadays with digital technology, it's as simple as like Google Drive or Dropbox, just sharing technology. But before, what scoring means is that you literally had to, scoring is like, taking the film and actually pressing music on it. Back in the old, film days, it was a really complicated process. So the idea of scoring is just the idea of putting music to a moving picture. Simple as that.
But you're doing it in real time, watching the scene after it's completed, right? So
Yeah,
every note goes.
What the workflow is a composer throughout history would have gotten a reel of film or a digital, video file, and that file is going to be inserted into some kind of software that can read it, some kind of program. And yeah, the composer might watch the scene, might take a couple notes. Back in the day, they would have a pad of paper and write things. And the director would say, this has to happen here. This has to sound like this here. Make sure the music stops here. You have a sheet of notes like that. And then you basically, slowly but surely, sometimes with the video, sometimes without the video, sometimes as it plays, sometimes with the dialogue, sometimes you mute everything, however you like to work, slowly but steady, you craft the score. And I can go ahead and screen share and show you basically what exactly one of my, actual scores would look like, kind of a modern score.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of the nitty gritty of it.
The placeholder score is something a director will use, correct? Just to do exactly as it's amply named, to placehold. But I've heard through the grapevine that deeply affects some of the decisions made, and that's why you see a lot of accusations of stolen and copied scores.
Yeah, that's called temp music, and most of the time, when a film is in the early editing phases or storyboarding phases, or in an animated film when it's just sketches, they will have a staff member, an intern that will have like an iTunes playlist or a few albums or old scores. They will put like sample music there. And unfortunately, because pre-production can take so long, the directors may have listened to this temporary music for months and months, and it's like stuck in their head. So a lot of composers say directors have what's called temp love, where they fall in love with the temporary music. And sometimes a composer is basically relegated to just mimicking the temp music in a way where you don't get sued, where you're just copying the temp. Sometimes the temp is just there to create a vibe. Sometimes the temp is there just to have music, and the director doesn't want that style at all. Some directors, the best ones, don't use temp at all. But yeah, there is temporary music that goes there beforehand, unfortunately. What's cool about a show like Game of Thrones or any TV show is that you could even use music from like previous seasons. So directors will be able to work with its own kind of music, which is cooler. Like, if you do a 4 or 5 part movie, like a Marvel movie or something, you could sample other Marvel music, so you could do that. But sometimes they'll just take a pop song and put it on there, and you had the composers like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, I just found that to be an interesting dynamic, because it's a situation in which
controversial part of the music, film scoring business, for sure. It's very, composers have strong opinions about it.
But it's understandable, at least as an outside, that the director would fall in love with what they've been hearing, or at least be preconditioned by that time to want something that's very familiar with the placeholder score. So I found that to be very, very interesting, because at the end of the day, it's they gotta do what not only is right for the film, but really more so what the director feels right is right for the film, which I'm sure is very, very frustrating in some instances.
Yeah, I mean, the director's the boss. That's the thing. And sometimes the director's vision of the music might not be what the composer wants, but the director cuts the check. So that's end of that discussion. Sometimes a composer can convince a director, but usually you just nod your head and say yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, what I have here on my screen, this is an actual project, a film I worked on a couple years ago. Like I told you in the intro, I do mostly TV music, but I do score a couple independent films throughout the year. This is called Afraid of Nothing. It's a documentary about some paranormal experiences and stuff. So the director will have sent me, this is just a normal MP4, and I have a program called Logic, and any composer might have any kind of software. This kind of software kind of came in the 80s and stuff. Before that, composers would write with paper and stuff, and that's a whole different process. But starting in the 80s, you would have a program like this where you import the video, and you could make the video larger or smaller, and you basically play the video with the dialogue track, and you might watch it one time through, blah blah blah. I'm just skipping through it, a little bit here.
And when my mother died, her spirit came out of her body.
So, and you might hear a little bit of, audio there. It's usually going to be rough audio or doubled audio. It's not going to be a clean cut. So you'll just hear what they're talking about.
I know it because I experienced it.
And your job as the composer, you might have a sheet of notes that have different timings. And up here, I'll have like a minute, 17 seconds. We need this, we need this. And then I have several instruments that are loaded here that I have in, like could be sound effects, like something like that. Or I might have, like this says glass flute. Like, because it's a horror film, so we're trying to just get like creepy sounds or...
And you associate certain, like, just like if you're doing something folksy, you might have a banjo or a fiddle.
Yeah, I mean, I got a piano here, which just helps me with different ideas. Little things. There's some bells here. So the composer will do the, different ideas, and then, you play it, and here's, what I composed. So you notice that the piano hits with the editing.
Yeah.
So there's several ways that the composer, tries to work with the editing, tries to do just an underscore, but those are conscious decisions. So like that moment where that church came up, I would have had to zoom in like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have moved this piano note right here, right to that moment. Boom. To make the editing seem more legit.
And I don't know if that was a lens flare right here with the layering of the text. I think it's just another layer of text coming in. You have a swoosh over that for the overlay of that I noticed as well.
Yeah, and that's, the video file that I get. Like I said, what the composer will work with is a rough cut that isn't color corrected, that might have rough audio, that might not actually be an accurate edit. So the director might come and say, hey, I moved that section over a second. And then the composer's like, damn it, I got to go back there and do that. So yeah, that would be cleaner in the final cut for sure. But yeah, that's kind of how we do it. And you just go through it. This is like just, I think, a 2-minute trailer. It might take you a day to do that. And you piece the music together. These blocks here are just when the music comes in. And then in this modern program, you just export it as an MP4, whatever, with the music in there, send it, and it's simple as that. But
yeah, it's easy, guys. See, that's easy. All that stuff right there. That's like 2 minutes of some people talking about ghosts being real, and you think that somebody with a video camera went and shot that, and they turned it around in a week, and they made a bunch of money. It's like, no, this it's so layered, and you do have a newfound appreciation for
it's an independent project too. I mean, and if you listen to this without the music, to be honest, I'm sorry if you're listening to Rob. We're listening, Rob. It looks crappy. It doesn't look professional. It looks like an independent production. The edits don't work. So by adding the music and me putting musical notes on the edit points and adding little sound effects like that and making musical themes, like I didn't really get to the theme. There's like an unsettling theme when this witch is like got a smoker's voice. She sounds so awful, but with the music, she actually sounds legit. So it makes these indie projects seem much more legit too. So
This is the table where we honor the dead. But they're really not dead because people never die.
Sure.
As long as you're alive, people never die because your skin is their skin. And when my mother...
Without the creepy music, it's like this New Jersey, cigarette smoking...
You never die unless you die. You're not dead until you're dead. That logic does hold that you're not dead until you're dead, but I'm telling you, honey... I
added a little melody there, and it makes the project kind of work. So the music kind of helps finesse the rough cuts a little bit.
Well, yeah, let me in this transition to my thesis of reality TV is in the most need of scoring. And I don't know if this is fair to say, but I'll say it anyways. It seems like the more something needs scoring, the more it needs, more music put over it and more cuts is a sure sign of inferior. storytelling. It's just a sign of a project that might not be that good, when you're just having to put so much window dressing over it, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times the director, the editor will love a certain cut so much, and you have to force the music to work in it, and the music just naturally doesn't work that way. And it just is what it is. And yeah, I do work on a lot of reality shows myself, so that does happen where a lot of times it just doesn't work how they want it to work, but it is what it is. Cut to a commercial break and no one remembers anyway.
When they don't have as long, in all fairness, like we were talking about Thrones, they set up these individual scores for individual characters, individual story threads, elements within the story. So they're setting a base. They're establishing the emotional spine of the story, and then they're working off of it. In a reality show, they got to make something seem like it is meaning a lot more than it should mean to you. Essentially, in a lot of cases, it's like, ooh, what happens if this guy doesn't, make some macaroni and cheese with lettuce?
The music might be so dramatic that it's comical.
Yeah,
like this person, oh my God, I'm gonna beat the clock, and I'm gonna get eliminated from this competition. My life's over, and they do this epic music, and it just works. But in Game of Thrones, like you're talking about, like they use these motifs, and the motifs are so strong that, for example, you have something like the Stark theme, which is one of my favorites, where you. That theme is so strong, and it's used season after season. You only need 2 notes of that to know it's a Stark.
Yep.
Boom.
Yep.
And that's when the composer really can kind of mess with the listener, where you only need 2 notes or 3 notes, and you can kind of fake a theme, or you could kind of change it. You do something a little different there. You can change this. So that's when a motif is very developed and very intricate. In a reality show, you wouldn't get something like that. You would get music that's probably very formulaic and very indicative of kind of your basic emotions. And
you need emotion now. You don't got eight seasons to get it. You need it now. You need connections now. You need investment. You need them to be immersed now. And it's interesting.
Shark Tank does have a couple very has a couple background kind of beats that they use all the time that kind of gives it a sound. So that's interesting. Like some shows do use these kind of formulaic things. Like Shark Tank is known for like this classic sound that they have, and it is what it is, and that's why people watch reality shows. The music is a big part of that.
Yeah, it's to a case of it's different. It's not. It's okay. You have as you were speaking about earlier with people at Juilliard and stuff talking about, there's kind of like a little bit of prestige behind being like a stage actor. It's like nothing's like the stage, and then they go out and do some films, and they're like, oh, I worked on the stage. This will be simple. Well, there's something to be said for not having a chance to do another shot, but there's also something to be said for having to do the same shot 75 times, and it's not even because of you. It's because of a technical issue, or it's because of the person working opposite to you. So they're not easier, they're not harder, they're different. They're not better, they're not worse. It's not a higher level of artistic existence. It is simply different. In reality shows, they need to get you immersed in Joe from buttfuck nowhere right away. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said for that, to be able to achieve it. I would really like to see, and I'd like to see it with the sound, unfortunately, meaning the actual, whatever, I think practical sound would be the term. I don't know. I'm not a composer, but meaning not cut it completely silent, but just see some of these scenes that I got right here without any music added. Little People, Big World is one right here. And they go through a few different stages right here. Playful to invoking some dangerous elements here that this situation could escalate, and then back to, just that kind of goofy. I don't know if you guys have a word for it in your industry, but when people are walking around in reality shows, it's always like that goofy, like it reminds me of like
it's quirky.
Yeah.
Quirky is the word that tends to get used, and you might have these goofy string notes or something like that, very comical.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you laugh. It makes there's a sense of urgency to that type of music.
It's bouncy, but it's silly.
It's very bouncy. And that's why there's certain speeds, certain music that have certain speeds. Like fast music is going to get people, you know, hyped up at the edge of their seat. Slow music is going to make them relax a little bit. So these are, again, these subconscious things the composer would use. Even the speed of the music works. And when I deliver music to a client, they always ask for the speed in mathematic form on there, like 120 beats per minute, 71, 72, because a lot of editors will really make sure the speed of music is like a 30-minute show isn't too fast too much, it's too slow. Before a commercial, it's going to be really fast. When you come back for a commercial, it's going to be very slow. And these are, you know, no one's sitting at home with a pizza, you know, knowing these things. But the people that produce these shows do know these things. And that's why, you know, they have these big budgets, because it's a lot of freaking work to kind of make these decisions and make these shows work and make people listen after the commercial break and listen week after week. And music's a big part of that.
If you're writing a spec for a drama and it's on HBO, or if it's on NBC, it's vastly different, because you have to account for commercial breaks in your writing and essentially set up mini cliffhangers before every single scene. So like you have to have an idea in your head before you start writing a screenplay about who you're trying to pitch this to, and you better have it so it's able to go to that other formula. It's able to go on Showtime or AMC, because it's vastly different. The way in which you frame out the situations, the way in which you do your acts are so, you know, it's very, it would be very abrupt and very just shocking to see like Walking Dead without a commercial break, as you watch it on Netflix. But if that was, you understand there was a commercial break there, they fade to black. But yeah, the way that you do your act breaks and the way that you script it out is completely different. And just your whole storytelling process is definitely, you know, the medium is the message per se. But I know about beats per minute, my friend. I was a DJ for 10 years. So Usher, 102 beats per minute. You know,
music is a science. It's an art and it's a science. I mean, there's very scientific reasons to why music works, and it's pretty cool. So we have a lot more examples, man. I know we might want to.
Yeah,
I know we prepared a lot. Thank you, everybody who's here in the chat. I know there's some great ladies here and great guys and great everybody is here. This is awesome. I love these people. John Carpenter's Halloween score. Well, somebody's in the chat. I guess it's Halloween time. I probably have to play that one, right? It just makes
he's back.
He's gonna stab you. Oh my God! Seriously, thank you everyone for coming. John Carpenter's Halloween score made the movie. That is right. We're talking about music here, and it's just a great topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Justin, you're the man.
On just to touch on that last point, with the movement, malls actually play during the holiday season music that is of a certain tempo to get people to move faster during the busy hours and to move slower when they need people doing more impulse buying and kind of browsing and, you know, fucking around essentially when it's not.
The human heart is at 120. I mean, 120 tends to be the beat per minute that works really well with people. That's why the Game of Thrones theme is 60. So it's a unit of 120, you know, I mean, 120 tends to be like your marches, your dun 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 dun, dun your patriotic marches. I mean, they all tend to have a certain speed, and because the human heart is just a metronome, it has a beat. So, you know, musical beats and the tempo of music really is a big, you know, it's a big factor in the overall effectiveness of the music. And sometimes composers think about that ahead of time. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, humans, we're just monkeys, man. We're just animals. We're very scientifically easy to manipulate with music, unfortunately.
Here's a few reality show.
What show is this?
Big People, Little World.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, bye. Why do you guys always have to do that when I'm on the phone?
When you're stuck in two rooms, there's bound to be cabin fever. There's bound to be some frustration.
But yeah, humans, we're just monkeys, man. We're just animals. We're very
Stop. Yep. Jacob sometimes pushes it a little too far when he tries to hang out with us.
Here's a few reality show. Do you have the sound coming through on your end there? Big People, Little World. Yeah. Nope, no big deal. Yeah, we have a few right here. We have some tension.
Miller!
Could it get serious? Could it not? The point is, those scenes would probably be very, very silly without anything, especially this.
Yeah, I mean, I look at a lot of reality shows pretty much every week. I have at least one or two reality shows in my session without music, and they look so awkward. And yeah, these pieces of music, they tell the story and they ask questions. A lot of time, music is about question and answer. You know, they might leave you with a question. Like if I just play this series of notes on my piano, the ear really wants to go there, you know, so the composer can leave certain notes, can kind of leave it there for a while, and then you're thinking, oh, what's going to happen there? And they won't resolve that note. So then the human being is waiting for that resolution, and then eventually you'll get that big note that you need to resolve it. So that's what they do in a lot of these reality shows. In that example you played, that's what they're doing. They're using music that doesn't resolve too much because you want to wait until these reality stars speak to resolve it. It's pretty brilliant, but it's also, you know, pretty cheesy.
Well, it's exactly, and then we're gonna do. This is an indie film that you're doing cool. Here. Yeah, and that is the same with screenwriting. You always you want to cliffhang after an action, meaning you want to resolve with the actual outcome of what happened, and not if it's going to happen. That's why The Walking Dead, when they did Negan not hitting anybody, everybody hated it so much. They left the cliffhanger at if the action was going to happen or not the consequence of the action. The world that you live in now. That's why the penultimate episode of Thrones is always the big battle, right? Because that's the action. The final resolution is what plays out after. You don't want to mess with people like that because they didn't leave it after he bashed somebody and say, now what are they going to do now that they killed Glenn and Abraham? They did it. Who did he hit? You know, did he hit? Which isn't good. Yeah, there you go. So this is an interesting one that you did. And again, it's a little slapstick, but you were driving home your point. But I really like this because you made me feel sadness. When I know there was no, you can always play Jaws, and I'll just keep talking with it. I love it. But I love it because I did watch this and I felt a range of emotions that I definitely didn't feel on the first view. Mm-hmm. They should have shut that.
This is a pretty cool example here. This is a project I worked on, and there you could see how extreme the music can really work towards the scene. I hope people watching are checking this out because this will be a good one to kind of put everything we're saying in visual form. So I will shut up and we shall enjoy.
Here's your tea. Oh, cheers.
He poisoned him.
Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
Looking for a man that knows what you want. I love this one, John. This is actually very good. I know you threw it together quick, but it's good.
Independent project, so not the best facial expressions, but the music really helps. Yeah.
This gave me a Succession vibe, and I really think this was actually effective. I know you threw it together, but I love that last one especially, brother. All right.
It's always fun to watch these things, and even these days there's a trend of like no music. So sometimes you watch old movies with different types of music or watch them with no music. It's like, oh, it just gives you just a different kind of a fresh thought, you know?
Yeah,
so.
and I know you wanted to go into a little bit of the history, and that does have to do with the silent movies. Are they used to refer to them as the talkies?
Yeah, we don't have to do too much, but just, for perspective, basically the reason why, film music is what it is that, silent movies used to be, silent. So when talkies came out, when they got the idea of a big theater of people watching a movie, you just don't want people sitting there in silence. So it's just kind of awkward. So they would just bring in musicians, a local piano player to play something. And they might, it wasn't the most professional musician. It was maybe the college kid or the local guy, and they might play something like. They might just play something goofy like that when the guy's walking, or, when there's danger, it might be like there might be some like dangerous music or something like that. They play like some basic stuff. And then as the years goes on, they used to get a little orchestra in the theater. And then, when film got more advanced, they used to have composers write specific music for movies. And then you would get the first kind of film scores that came out that were naturally on the, uber dramatic side, because they're, that's what they needed to be. So the first film score was actually King Kong. And I'll play it real quick. You could hear how busy it is, how over the top it is, because that's what film music was designed to do, really. So even with 3 notes, you automatically are put in a certain world. This was written in 1933 in a black and white movie with this weird looking King Kong. Without the music, it totally loses its value. So that kind of grand old school sound kind of just remained in the tradition of film scores up until the 70s and 80s. And then in the 80s, like I said, these electronic programs like what I'm using started to come out, and people started, doing more like kitchen sink composing, I call it, where they would, use an electronic sound or use a random instrument or more creative sounds. But, for the most of the film scoring world, it was that over the top orchestra music like you heard. And, it's very nostalgic. That's how John Williams writes. Star Wars is a notable example of that. But that's where it started. And that's back in 1933. So from the silent film on, music have that pivotal storytelling role. Because in real life, when we're just walking down the street, we don't have a freaking orchestra playing in the background. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Like, so you're watching movies like, why exactly is there music playing? But it's like, this is where this tradition kind of came from. So I wanted to do a quick word into that. There's your history class for the day, kids. No homework. Don't worry about it. But you could follow me on Twitter if you'd like. I posted couple videos of some early scores, and I'll post a few more if you want to really nerd out on that. But that will be the end of our little history lesson.
Well, I love it too.
Unless there's any questions.
Yeah, no, and we're going to get into some questions. But it's the evolution of the medium in general. In storytelling, if you notice, things are very on the nose with the earlier stories. Things seem way over the top more in earlier stories.
You got the guy with the pretty girl with the long hair, with the love theme and the zooming out, and it was the evolution of over the top to more now where it's like so realistic. They'll show someone getting stabbed in the neck like right on the screen. It's like,
and we'll still critique it on YouTube. I'm like, that's not how it would happen. But yeah, it goes down at, when it's the little factoid here, when they first came out with the medium of actually having the ability to have television and film, they thought that video wouldn't be able to tell stories because it was too realistic, as they put it, when Henry Ford had his.
You got this guy loaded up?
Yeah.
So this is an example of an early film organ where, like I said, they would have maybe $100 for one person. They would build these goofy organs where you would play with both feet. You would pre-program in the piano part. Like I said, they would have a book that said, scary music here, happy music here, or the movie would have a pre-printed sheet music someone would type in, and then this guy would just be doing all the effects. And this guy is great. It's just part of our history. We're talking like the 19-teens is when these early films would have an organ like this in the front.
Yeah.
To really mimic everything. If a guy falls down and slips on a banana peel, he gets the whoop. If someone gets punched in the head,
yeah.
those traditions had to start somewhere. People, it didn't start with Tom and Jerry. It started with, poor musicians like this guy that needed a job. So the theater hired him. And these were the first quote unquote film composers, but really they're film improvisers. Like if I just had my piano on and I was playing, with you, just making up stuff, I'm improvising. That's what these guys would do. With a live show, there would be different music every night for the movie. That whatever the guy or girl, then there's this famous old lady, I say old lady, she lived till she was like 103. This famous lady would travel to all the theaters and she would play different music every day. So that was cool.
I guess it would vary on the level of dementia and alcohol intake, but yeah, and it's important to remember that as far as the medium goes, that at first they're selling the film. They're selling the experience of going to a film, not even the story as much. If you watch old trailers, which were made by an actual just one organization that I did a whole video on, I'm blanking on right now, but it doesn't matter. The point is, it's always selling the Hollywood spectacle. It's selling the actual medium of this visual story. So it's like it's never as much focused on what the story's about. It's you've never seen it before here in this type of in brand new Technicolor, or it's a Technicolor or whatever it was, back in the day.
Hollywood glitz and glam. It's that fabulous,
You've never seen a story like this before with a leading man. Yeah, it's always just
we have that flowing music. Absolutely, man.
It's the spectacle of the event, not the story within as much.
So let's hear this guy here. This is funny what these guys used to do.
Well, this guy's a master. I'm gonna name him good old Willie Wilkerson here.
Everyone has a fucking
I just want to say, okay, I was way louder than you, but also you couldn't do that. That guy's so freaking talented, man. That's everything you had in your program.
Just having the movie playing and you just have all these goofy tools to hit at every moment. And like I said, every night they would have a different score. They would just do different sounds. And then eventually they said, all right, the movie should have the same soundtrack every night in every town. So then, all right, we're going to have one composer. And then it grew from there. But yeah, these guys would just travel around.
They're like, that's not going to be any good. They're like, what about the wacky sounds? You know what I mean? They're like, you're killing the business. But everybody let me know if this sounds good, evidently, because my mic input is different than the actual sound from John over there. So,
well, in Cardinal Doomsday, let me know if I need to turn mine up or if you could hear me, because I do kind of stand a little bit far away so I could play the piano. So if it's an issue of mine being too low, let me know.
I'm just screaming into
heard
my
any
mic.
of the points I've been making?
Yeah, I wish I had a fancy reason like a piano. All right, so we will move on from there and go into just a little bit of general conversation about what people really praise these days and what is really hot at the moment as far as scoring goes, and that seems to be Djawadi. That seems to be the way it's going. Also, Zimmer. Could you give us a little bit of insight into? I think you kind of touched on it a moment ago when you said they started to do less music in the traditional sense and started to kind of use worldly items and invoke other, or inject other tones into it that aren't necessarily coming from the piano or strings and so forth.
Yeah, pretty much like I said, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you had this orchestral score. And even till today, you have a few holdouts of the orchestral tradition like John Williams. But then in the 80s, you started to get these synthesizer scores or these sound effects where, hey, instead of having a tuba play a low note or instead of having the strings go or Psycho where you have the where you have this crazy Psycho where you have the strings, instead of doing that, why don't we just have an electronic sound? something like that. Why don't we just have an electronic sound? So then electronics started to come into it, and then different instruments started to come in the 90s. You had movies like Lion King, and you had Gladiator, things like that. And Hans Zimmer was this young hip composer who, like we talked about before, he wasn't really trained in classical music theory. So he didn't know what the rules were to break. He didn't think he was breaking rules. He was just writing music. So Hans Zimmer was this guy who wasn't really trained in music theory and started writing these unique scores. And then from basically the 90s till now, he's basically defined how film scores are written in an epic, minimalistic, repetitive, impactful, way. And he was just written some of the greatest modern film scores. And Ramin Djawadi from Game of Thrones, he comes from that Hans Zimmer school of epic, let's have a guitar in the soundtrack. Why do, let's not do the full orchestra. But then there's this idea of let's have the orchestra, but let's also have an orchestra of electronics and an orchestra of pots and pans and an orchestra of drummers. And let's have the best classical musicians and the best African musicians come together for like Black Panther or something like that. So that's where film score is very creative, and we aren't stuck in the 1800s like your local symphony might be or something like that. So Zimmer kind of transformed the orchestra into something else. Some people say that it's a good thing. Some people say it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. So yeah, the modern score style is definitely in that epic fashion,
more atmospheric. It's more
atmospheric. Underscores the term I use, where it's
what is the name of the tone that is now the go-to, and it's almost a cliche at this point. The drum drum.
Yeah,
Zimmer like started that with Inception, I believe.
It's called a bram. It's a really low, just kind of thump. I sort of played one before. That's not really it. I mean, I have a bunch of them, but I'd have to load them up. It's just a big electronic note on like the lowest note of the piano. But then he would like take a tuba player and record him playing his lowest note and put him on top. So it was just this big horn honk, and it just sounded epic. It was like one finger on the piano, and now that was it. And that's just what Zimmer's good at. He's good at producing sounds. And film music now is all about the sound. Like if you watch The Joker, it's just the sound of a cello playing like two. It's just a sound. And that's what it all is right now, is what kind of sound are you creating? What kind of soundscape? What kind of atmosphere are you creating? It's not so much about what kind of cheesy theme you can make for, the fight scene or things like that. Game of Thrones was probably one of the last shows to probably going to do that really well until the trends start cycling back towards that.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting you say, because that's what I was about to say, that we look at these as cheesy now, but now even with the the Brahm, that's looked at as cheesy already, and that's
it is now the only style of film music that's eternal tends to be orchestral music.
Yes,
and that's why the orchestra is still alive today. I mean, that's why orchestra is this crazy part of tradition that we just have preserved forever, and that's why you can listen to soundtracks from the 90s, 80s, 70s. With the full orchestra, and they just have that feeling because it's a human being playing human music, and it's living music. I mean, that music sounds fresh. That's why the orchestra is always going to exist in film. You listen to some of the, or even you listen to like something like Dragon Ball Z, like when I was a teenager, it's like, what the hell? This sounds straight from the time. It's like, what is this weird electronic sound? But you listen to an orchestra score, it's always going to move you because it's those human beings. So that's the pros and cons. That's where you get into that hoity-toity orchestra-only world. But, it's a fun world to be a part of, man. You never know what's going to happen. I would have never known 2 years ago that there would be a Scandinavian woman who went inside the Chernobyl reactor with a microphone and made a score for the TV series based on that, and who also scored the Joker. I would have never known that would happen. I mean, what a cool world.
I didn't know that until now. So
the lady that did the music for the Joker, she did the music for Chernobyl, and that lady went inside a nuclear reactor, the Chernobyl reactor, with a full suit with her assistant. I don't know how much she was paying that guy, with a microphone, and just recorded the sound inside of there. She took the sound, put it in her computer, and every piece of music you hear in Chernobyl are sounds that are from that nuclear reactor. So her orchestra was from that nuclear reactor. She just played them in the piano. So that's where you get these crazy ass innovative composers. And then she got the job doing the Joker. That's why she's making millions of dollars. God bless her soul.
It seems like overkill still. I mean, you can get that ambient sound, you know, in post-production, but I get it. I get it.
A big composer I look up to, Brian Keane, who's one of my mentors. He says the same thing. He's like, you know, these people will try to record all these sounds. You could also just get a piece of software and make it sound like that yourself in the computer. But
Tommy Lee played the drums underwater upside down. You know what I mean? Like, that's cool. Was it necessary? No. To go back on to the
film music is so creative like that. You know, that's where the fun of it. And you usually have the budget to be able to do that, which is nice. It's the one part of the world where they still have a budget for musicians to be able to experiment, and they have a budget to pay musicians to contribute. And that's nice. It's nice. It
is. And thank God there's still people with money that are insane and artistic, because as you know, all of us artistic people are a little bit off. So, you know, like somebody's like, what do I need to pay $1 million for? It's for somebody to go get radiation to, record a production that she definitely could have got in the studio, minus the radiation. He's like, funded. So, but yeah, you know, like anytime that you tell a story and you tie it too close to the times, it becomes a epic 70s or 80s or 90s movie. But I assume from what I'm getting, it goes through the same thing for the music, right? Because the more that you utilize things that are in at the moment, are tied to the society and cultural times, the contemporary time, then as time goes on, just like those stories that were too strapped into the world in which they were created in, they don't age as well, and they don't have the reusability, rewatchability. That's why when you have fantasy tends to be a little bit more timeless, especially when you take your stories and do sub creation like Tolkien did and do it off Earth. He did it for multiple reasons, because he does believe stories come true quite literally.
If you listen to Lord of the Rings, the soundtrack sounds amazing. That freaking thing was written 18 years ago. You watch Lord of the Rings, it still has that impact. I mean, because it's that epic, orchestral, active motif type of music. And that's what it is. And I have an example in our folder of Spider-Man where you got Peter Parker and they just chose to put some pop tracks over it. And in my opinion, I think it looks terrible. And you take the music out of it, and I think it's really good. So you're right that sometimes when they choose to just put pop music in there, or period music, or just cheesy, kind of, second-rate music of the time, it might be cool for the box office at the time, but it's not timeless. But these timeless scores tend to be the orchestral ones, the ones that people love: Star Wars, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Lord of Rings, Blade Runner, Titanic. They're all orchestra scores. Look at that. The timeless scores are all orchestra scores. So in this Spider-Man example, they just chose like a couple pop songs, and maybe it worked, but I think it works better.
I'll throw it up. I would say that it seems to me, and what really entices me to just want to learn everything I can about scoring is the way in which they do it in Lord of the Rings and in Thrones, in which the story threads are accompanied by their own scores, and you have the merging, like I was talking about before. But you also have more options with an orchestra, right? Like when Djawadi ended up using keys for the first time with the Night King, that gave him an opportunity to using that, the way in which he utilizes the whole orchestra gives him the opportunity to have that arsenal, right? So then he can go subvert it in real time.
Different instruments have different tendencies and different sounds. I mean, most of Game of Thrones tends to be on the lower side of the strings. So when you hear that main theme, you're hearing just very low cellos, and that just gives you a very low kind of, vibe. Yeah, you get that kind of low cello, and then when you get this moment where there's a piano, which is kind of high, and the first moment is that kind of light of the seven. And so on and so forth. It's like, this is a different sound. So that goes into the instrumentation, which is totally different. What instruments are you going to choose to convey the feeling? In Lord of the Rings, they use those flutes a lot, those those really
Mhm.
beautiful wooden flutes
Lutes
for like
and
the Shire, the lute. You don't have flutes in Game of Thrones because it's low, it's dark. So the director specifically said, if you look at the history of that soundtrack, they said, Ramin, don't use flutes. So that we wanted the low cellos. And when you get, King Robert coming, it's low, you get a little bit of trumpet. So yeah, the instruments you choose really do affect the vibe that you're trying to get across. And there's several reasons for that.
And it can really hammer home when you have that, that just using the keys for the first time, or no, Winds of Winter used it for the first time. So it's only been used twice. It really has more of an impact. A little side note is, if you're trying to see how important characters are, take note that Theon doesn't get a score until the second season, I believe. It's definitely not in the first season. He just goes along with the Stark score as he just goes along with the Starks. So that's what I love about it as a writer, that the story threads and the motifs are directly in line, and it's beautiful because, so if you're trying to analyze a show, maybe take note of when characters start to have a score behind them. And it's so great because you get the finality of the scores. Like they stop, you never hear like Jon Snow's score all the way through until the very end. You don't hear the Starks until, I believe, they take back Winterfell. You know what I mean? You have the finality within the story, and then you have it, you're able to hear it through the music as well. We'll do this. This is an example. This is a great example of what John is referring to. And it's, I've heard it referred to as a good composer knows when not to score. Spielberg said that about John Williams, that he knew when not to put in his actual soundtrack there. So he knew when to hold back and when to use it. So less is more always. So this is an example that I think is pretty pretty
out
fair.
The Spider-Man scene, guys, and people in the chat, let me know which ones you like better. It's going to be the no music first, and then I think the music after. So I did the raw version and then the music, the version with the music. In my opinion, I think it's
We got a little bit of that crazy music still left over. Hold on. That's what happens when you're running them all. All right, so we'll pull that one up. Yeah, this is going to be the Spider-Man example. So, yeah, switch to camera 4. Come on, do it. Yeah, it's starting to start. We'll do it live. What a dick. Doesn't help that he's just ridiculous.
But it's interesting to watch him being ridiculous without music. It's to me, I think it's just more effective. The music does work. It's just he's such a good actor doing it,
I think it's meant to embrace how he sees himself, opposed to how he really is. Meth head got in the bar again. What I really think is interesting is, I've worked in many, many nightclubs, and that would not be acceptable to any of them. But is sound design as well, that, if you ever look at what they use to create what they'll have the daily with the door shutting, and then how they like make the noise of a door shutting. It's always something crazy, like smashing like some bamboo against like a cement wall or something. That's not an exact example, but it's always insane. Like that chair, that chair sliding across the floor, that noise that you heard, guarantee that wasn't the noise of a chair sliding across the floor. It was probably something so abstract and goofy. Those guys are insane. They're insanely
just like
talented.
2 pieces of wood scratching against you. Or for horror sounds, what they do is they'll take like a cabbage or something like that with a knife and just stab the cabbage or stab the watermelon and get those crunchy sounds and stuff. Yeah.
They're like, to get the sound of a car engine starting, we will be setting a house on fire. It's always insane how they get to their places, but it's crazy just because we're depicting a person's life on screen, but as we know in our own lives that there's not a first or second or third act, or maybe there is, but you're never really quite aware of where you are in your story arc. So it's a hyper aware depiction of what this story is. It takes away all unnecessary things and it adds in other things to help convey it, and we have to use these tools like the score and condensed storytelling, in the sense of you don't see your Jon Snow on the day that he wakes up at Castle Black and doesn't have anything to do. It's fast tracked. It's more how we see life in hindsight rather than how life truly is. So we do have a soundtrack to our own life as well in our own head. Some's a little bit darker than others. What do you think about people crossing over from mainstream to doing scoring, such as you have Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, Elton John, of course, and stuff like that. But I know the Social Network got a lot of buzz and stuff like that, and then we'll start to close it up. But what do you think about those contemporary boys coming over in your field?
Yeah, like I said, the modern way is just the kitchen sink. There's just everybody's welcome, and everybody wants a piece of the pie because it's a good business. So for I dare say a washed up pop musician or a pop musician that doesn't want to go on the road anymore, film scoring is just a great field. And there's a lot of artists that are crossing over into film scoring. It's a tough business to get into. So if you're already kind of in the quote unquote music business, it's kind of easy to just, call the right person and get a movie job. So that's, I think, kind of how Trent Reznor did it, and Junkie XL and a lot of these big guys. But it's very, common to see pop stars transition into film scoring. You're seeing a lot of that, which is pretty cool. And I think it makes for more creative soundtracks, people that have actually performed live and know what live people react to. I think is sometimes better than a composer who only sits in their studio, who, only, plays the music to themselves. So there's a benefit sometimes to having a live performer, someone with live performance experience doing a score. But you're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing people that, aren't trained doing scores, people that are trained classically. You're seeing people finally of all, ways of life and from all different places, people that are working in little basement studios like mine, or people working in big facilities or working in the studio. With digital technology and the internet, there's just so many ways to do it. And, I showed you some examples, just write a screenshot of kind of, how you could just make music for productions or make art or anything right in your computer. So that's kind of the magic of it with film scoring. But these days, basically anyone's getting into it. I mean, I recommend people study it and study music theory and, learn an instrument and stuff. But
what would be the instrument that you recommend? I assume it's the keys, but
piano is basically the backbone of music. I mean, you got everything in this 88 key box right in front of you. And with piano, like what I do as a composer is I'll just kind of sit at the piano and do different moods, like, film kind of moods, like. I'll just play like little simple moods and stuff. So you kind of have to have some skills on, which notes to play to make sound good. Why does this go into this sound epic? You kind of got to know how to move around the piano. So that's cool. But, I started with just like band instruments in the public school. So just learning any instrument is going to, and just the idea of reading music and stuff will help anyone. Guitar is also really beneficial. A lot of composers play guitar because you could just kind of pick it up. And again, it's just like a box of music right there for you. So, piano is just very beneficial. And when you compose at the computer, like I am, you usually have a an electronic piano to work with. So that's just part of the skill set usually, is you're pretty decent at piano. But yeah, none of these composers are like concert pianists. Like, I'm not going to go out and perform on the piano, but I can get by, those basic little emotional chords like I'm playing, and basic little instruments and stuff. So
yeah,
piano's just fun. I mean, the white keys are just great. You can go over and just hit just the white keys and not worry about the black keys and not know any scales and anything, and you could sound pretty dang good.
You hear that, kids? You don't got to learn the damn scales. And it's classy as fuck. So
that's just like jazz chords. That was just me on the white keys, and it's just, the barrier to entry is not as crazy as people may think. But if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So that's the thing. It's not easy, and it's part of the process. And it's good if people don't recognize film music. It's not meant to be recognized, but some people like to listen to it in album form. Some people do notice it. If you're new to listening to music and film, I recommend you just listen to Star Wars, and it's kind of obvious to listen to how the, different characters have themes. And obviously, if you watch Game of Thrones, you might notice it. But I recommend to listeners to just get interested in soundtracks. It's a cool, part of the creative business, but also get interested in costuming and editing and storyboarding and sound effects. It's a whole world to make these things together. We judge things so quickly when we're sitting on our asses, and you don't realize that how many humble people are here at the bottom of the food chain that contribute to this, and music is just one of those.
Yeah, it's always the argument,
my little closing speech there.
There you go.
Into it.
No, it was beautiful, man. I mean, support the arts. But somebody that I'll actually be doing a Watchmen reaction with after it airs tonight.
Is Watchmen on right now?
No, it's going to be. That's where it's in 20 minutes, so we're going to be closing up. But
20 minutes.
It's Axel's always from Westworld Theory Cast and Daily DVR. We partner a lot, and he will constantly remind me, because I'm so story centric, right? Which, in fairness, if the story isn't good, it doesn't matter how good the production is. But
that's right.
It is. So like that. I mean, here there's a lot of validity to that statement. But it is true, that we often will shit on things completely when the production is a masterpiece. But also, you can't use the sentiment of, well, the people from Game of Thrones worked hard on the last season. It's like, yes, they did, and we're not saying anything bad about that if you didn't like the story. But the point is, you can do all the work you want into a dog turd behind the scenes. Like, if it's a dog turd,
the point is just there's more to appreciate sometimes.
Yes,
than just the story. Like,
absolutely,
Djawadi is taking the Game of Thrones music on a live tour right now. There's orchestras all over the world performing this music. So there's ways to appreciate the music by itself.
Yes.
Or there's ways to appreciate the editors, or there's ways to appreciate even the writers, and there's also a way to bash them as well.
Yeah.
But just realizing that, hopefully this stream helped people realize that, hey, there's maybe a lot more that goes into the sound part that you might not know.
Absolutely. And
how is very important. And even, to be honest, and I'm a composer, I'm going to tell you, composing is not the hardest part of the audio. I mean, people that do dialogue and sound effects, I think that's much harder of a job. So, I'm not being a diva. I don't want to be, because the music's pretty hard sometimes, but to do sound effects and dialogue, those people, they need to get more Emmys, and they don't get credited enough either. So,
yeah, absolutely.
The writers we can make fun of, no problem. They're in the air conditioned room with the pencil. And
hey, fuck you, man. But
kidding,
no, but it just you
got to have a well written story.
Yeah,
these movies like Clash of Titans, Wrath of Titans. You got these great effects, and the story makes no sense.
Yeah, Michael Bay is all situation. Yeah, Yeah, it's a whole lot of scenarios, not a whole lot of story. It's like robots are attacking a city. It's like, oh, who's there? I don't know, fucking people. You'll see them. But it's something to appreciate. And it's like, if you are somebody that does critiques, especially on YouTube, which, everybody's got a voice, for better or worse, that goes for me as well. But you should, and I always like when Axel reminds me of that, because I will not excuse poor story for great production, but it is something to take note of, and maybe to focus on a little bit more as well. When people are making a million videos on only one TV show, maybe they can go back to what you missed in this, or what, and talk about something. That's why I jump at the opportunity to have somebody like John on, because he's working in the field. That's unheard of. It's like Heidi from Costume Co. and you know what I mean? Or like the only YouTubers that actually like do are active in the industry in which they speak about. If you didn't read any of my screenplays unless you've been to like one local theater or you live in my garbage can. So you know what I mean?
Well, speaking of Heidi, she's a great customer, and we do a show together. I'll do a little shameless plug that we have a show called the Creatives Guild, where, yeah, like Justin said, we have people that are actually in the creative fields that are, you know, making a living doing so, getting together and collaborating together, talking about, you know, we all know each other for Game of Thrones, so we talk about Game of Thrones. And I think next week we're going to do a show on our top 4 favorite just Halloween movies. So we're doing different screenplays and different shows and stuff. But yeah, we have creative people that, you know, just talk creatively that, you know, can actually back up what they're saying a little bit. And we only talk about what we are good at. So I talk about music. She talks about costumes. And we have Rebecca, who's a professional editor in New York, talks about editing. We have our own channel called the Creatives Guild. You could check that out. And we do have a couple shows coming up. So yeah, those, you know, people that Justin mentioned, Heidi, she's great. She's a real costumer. She's a real YouTuber. She has a great following. And I don't really consider myself a YouTuber, but I love putting out videos and I love talking about this stuff. And I do this stuff for a living. So I don't mind hopping on Twitter or YouTube to talk with people about it, because, you know, this is what I'm most passionate about. The only skill I have is music. I'm not really good at anything else.
Well, that's one.
I stick in my lane.
That's one hell of a line. Well, it's just important with the if you're going to critique. I mean, if you're going to be authoritative about something, be authoritative about something you're an authority on. So
exactly.
You know,
everyone has the right to have an opinion. But,
a consumer critique is the most valid or the most valuable critique there is. They want just the Joe Schmo that watches the show like a normal person and doesn't dissect it. An insider industry review is less desired by not only viewers but by the industry itself. So you know what I mean? Some people just I don't know, they make themselves into professors when they literally are the thing that the audience wants and the you know, the what they're critiquing wants anyways. So but no,
I'm happy to offer my, I guess, quote unquote you know, expertise, I guess.
Well, insight into something.
Insight is a great way to put it. You know, this kind of secret world of music.
Yeah.
And how it actually, the actual files are put together and how it works. So
I just love it so much because I'm a huge fan of just how impactful story is, and to see the elements of screenwriting and storytelling in general being directly mirrored and paralleled within your craft. I mean, it's amazing. You know, like you're talking about the cuts to commercial breaks. You know, that's so pivotal when writing. It's pivotal when scoring, and I think the best composers help us go back to the stories that we love time and time again. And I always call it just milking the, you know, like a sponge, squeezing a show like a sponge to get the most enjoyment out of it, because we're gluttons. So we try to find all these reasons to rehash certain aspects of it, but there's so much out there, especially when you have a professional like you that's in the field, to go back and let's talk about Thrones, let's talk about Lord of the Rings, you know, and let's talk about the music, because it's not just the music, it's the story, and the story, it wouldn't be what it is without the music, and the music vice versa. You know what I mean? So
that's the magic thing about film music. You know, it's not meant to be listened to on albums and CDs and on iPhones and stuff, but, you know, people like to listen to soundtrack albums. It just tells a story. So it's not meant to be listened to like that, but it's kind of interesting that there's a whole genre, a whole industry of soundtrack music. It's meant to be paired with a specific picture, but it can also be listened to by itself and help tell a story. So that's a really amazing thing. It's part of our music history. It's kept our orchestras alive. It's, you know, it's John Williams particularly, we've talked about a lot. He's composed the soundtrack to our lives. I mean, he did the NBC News theme during the freaking Iraq War. He did the Olympics theme. He did Star Wars, E.T. I mean, this man has composed a soundtrack to our lives. So it's part of our history. It's part of our pop culture. And it's just, it's not always appreciated. And in the fact that it has its own genre, its own industry, people are selling albums of background music. I think it's really cool. I think it's really exciting. And it's thankful to the, you know, to the people that are there listening, that they appreciate it. And it's because there might be, you know, it could have been a world where they just said silent film should be silent. And, you know, Alfred Hitchcock could have just had every movie, you know, be silent. And that could have just been our tradition. Imagine that. We're lucky to live in that
Imagine a world. Yeah.
Imagine a world without music. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my God. I think there's a Twilight Zone episode about that.
There is.
World
There's
without
there's Twilight Zone about everything. But yeah, just to close it up, thank you so much.
I'm getting all sentimental.
No, I am too.
I love music and I love talking about it. And, you know, thank you, Justin, for inviting me. And when I was preparing for this stream, it helped to reinvigorate me. Because when you do this stuff full time, sometimes you forget the joy of it. When you do it as a job, you forget. And when I was preparing this over the past couple of days, it made me kind of, you know, get connected to the composers of the past and make me kind of reevaluate how, you know, impactful music can be. Because sometimes I get burnt out. So I appreciate the opportunity. It was really fun to get this together. Actually, doing the research helped invigorate me a little bit more. So,
well, I learned a whole lot doing the research, and we'll have to do another one of these, and I'll have to hopefully get an invite onto that channel of yours, and we'll put some links. But you know, like I said, you know, like we were talking about.
We should actually. I'll talk to you after about the next Creatives Guild, because we're always saying we need a writer. Like we have an editor, composer, cause we need a writing specialist. So
yeah,
talk about that after this for sure.
Yeah, you know, I mean, just like you said, it's meant to add to the story, not be the story. It's like if you notice the lighting guy in a production, it's probably for a bad reason. But it does stand on its own. And for people that are looking to squeeze all of the joy out of, especially Thrones and stuff, since, you know, guys, I'll just say for an ending note, Thrones wasn't the first story you ever loved, and it won't be the last. You know, but if you're looking for all these reasons to go back and look at all these story threads and do videos about stuff we missed, it's like, look into these aspects. You know what I mean? There's a lot there. It's not just the music, you know, and like I said, so it's so, I learned so much about how the score has developed, and saw how we definitely see Lord of the Rings inspiring Thrones musically, just as you see it inspired, you know, from a literary sense. So if you guys have not subscribed over to John's channel, I got an information. I will post a link right now, actually, in the live chat. And if anybody that is watching this later, you know, make sure to leave some comments on some stuff you'd like to see in the future. I have a Ironborn stream with the Disputed Lands, Amanda from the Disputed Lands, Iron Islander freaking aficionado, a connoisseur of the culture. We're going to be looking at the Iron Islanders and their culture, the way that they were created, the way in which they formed this society within the narrative, and how their lore and their mythology parallels real historical events, what we, you know, adhere and you know, connect them to as far as Vikings and other C rating and varying peoples, and how accurate that may be, but also just the mythology that is surrounding them, and how that tells us a lot about who they are and what role they play in the story. And Amanda has so many great insights into the Ironborn, and has had me doing also a lot of great research, just getting ready to talk to another really talented person. So I got 2 in a row, so I got lucky. John tonight, and Amanda will be tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be doing the live deep dive into the Iron Islanders. What is dead may never die. So make sure to subscribe. I don't know if that reaction for the Watchmen will be on YouTube or just a podcast. Axel just messaged me, but keep an eye out for it if you'd like to support creativity. I have my wonderful Patreons that help me not make money, but just lose a little less money by creating content. And it makes making videos a little bit easier, and setting time aside a little bit more. Just it to be honest, just being capable to set some time aside a little bit more possible. And like I said, I'm not looking to get rich off the channel. I just would like to supplement the income in the sense of how much it costs for editing programs and stuff like that. So if you $3 a month wouldn't be noticeable to you out of your pocket every month, it would make a huge impact to me. But again, if you'd like to buy coffee with that, I can't argue with that logic. So yeah, sign on up if you'd like to, and make sure to support great creators like John. Would you like to say anything before we leave, brother?
No, I think I did a couple kind of quasi closing speeches, but really, you know, I don't, you know, I do have a YouTube channel. You can check it out right there. Just my name, John DelVento. I unfortunately don't put out videos frequently. Obviously, I'm a full-time composer, and it just, I get really seriously busy, especially in fall and winter. I just wrapped up a Geico commercial. I'm doing some new shows right now, and so it's tough for me, but I do like putting out videos. I have a couple, especially last month I put out multiple videos. I do have some Game of Thrones music, because I know a lot of the community here is interested in Game of Thrones. So I put out some music on the Stark theme. I have a video that's almost ready to be finished. You know how it is. You got the sessions saved. You just got a little bit of editing left, finding the time of the Greyjoy theme music, which is really great. But I'm going to go through before the end of the year all our favorite house themes from Game of Thrones, and we're going to get into Lord of the Rings and all those kind of things. So yeah, I have the Creatives Guild, which is another venture. But in terms of my music, you can go to johndelvento.net, which has everything. I don't have a lot of music on SoundCloud because I sell a lot of the rights to my music, so I can't post a lot of my music publicly. But you could watch any of the shows that are using my music. You could find it regularly. And every time you watch those shows, a few pennies trickles down to me, which is great. So thank you, everyone, for supporting me. Keep watching Chopped. I'm working on Ghost Hunters now. That's happening now. So the recent Ghost Hunters episode, I've been doing the music for that. So it's been fun. I work here in my cave, and it's great to just at least get quote unquote out here on YouTube talking to people. So we got to go watch Watchmen.
Yeah, let's go do it.
Thank you, Justin. You're the man.
You're doing it backwards. You're so busy working in your industry instead of making videos about the industry that you can't make videos.
I know.
That's it's the opposite on YouTube.
I'm supposed to be selling an ebook, right? Or something.
Yeah. I'm supposed to be writing. I'm too busy talking about writing. But I know I work a lame job for money. So, all right. Yeah.
Been there, done that, dude. You get the day job, and then as it grows, your passion becomes your career, man.
There you go. Yep. If you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life unless what you love to do costs any sort of money. Then you definitely need to work. So
is glamorous. But hey, Sante Via, have a great one. Hope your children are doing well, your family's doing well. That's it for me.
Best wishes. All right, guys.
Great supporter.
Oh yeah, they all are. They're all the best. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.